You are all aware of the fact that in the last few days or last few weeks, we've had a lot of serious security challenges. We've had what happened in Edo State, the attack on some travelers because they were suspected to be bandits. We've had what the governor of Borno said, that Boko Haram is increasing in its taking more control of some areas in Borno, as well as the recent killings and attacks that took place in Plateau State, even today. We are speaking on that today with Dr. Kabir Adamu, PhD. He's a security consultant. He's spoken extensively about the security challenges in Nigeria, and he is the managing director of Beacon Consulting Nigeria Limited. Dr. Kabir, you are welcome.
My pleasure. I'm delighted to be here. Unfortunately, though, the topic we'll be talking about is not a delightful topic, sadly, especially given the recent developments that you've cited. But it's good to be here and hopefully to talk about a way out.
Yeah. How extensive, really, will you assess the current situation to be?
Extensive that it deserves for the National Security Council to sit. The company I head, Beacon Security and Intelligence Limited, releases monthly reports. And last week we released our March 2025 report. And it showed that 1,300 persons were killed in the month of March. It also showed that from the beginning of January to the end of March, more than 3,000 Nigerians had been killed. It also showed that in the month of March alone, 800 persons were abducted. It showed that from the beginning of January to the end of March, about 2,600 Nigerians were abducted. When we broke it down, it showed us that the three northern regions, were affected by about 80% of these figures that I mentioned. In fact, in the case of abduction, about 90%, and in the case of fatalities, about 80%. For abduction, only about 10% affected the three southern regions, and then for fatalities, about 20% affected the 3,000 regions. And of course, we were able to break down state by state, and we were able to see in clear terms which states were more affected. And there were some common themes that were run across the worst affected state, starting from weak governance in terms of the security sector governance that was in place in those states, to socioeconomic conditions, poverty, illiteracy, name them, that were extremely high in those locations. And then the one that, of course, is also common in most northern states is the several ungoverned spaces, which was not peculiar to the north, it was also in the south. But because of the other conditions that were in the north, you saw a reflection of that. Another common theme is the proliferation of non-state armed groups, non-state actors who were operational within the security space. Some of them were backed by the state, while others, private players, who for one reason or the other picked up weapons and were challenging the supremacy of the use of force by the state. And unfortunately, that monopoly of the use of force by any sovereign state is so challenged at the moment in Nigeria by different groups, and to an extent sometimes even by individuals. Now, added to that is the weak justice system that fails to arrest and punish offenders. So you see a lot of offenses being committed, killings, and sadly, no repercussion. The justice system does not fail. In fact, the worst side of it is the justice system actually ends up extorting the victims, because they go to report, and then in some instances they are arrested, and then it becomes a cycle of extortion. Another one is the political grievance. Political grievance is also playing a role at the moment. And I think the fact that the president is not in the country at the moment has not effectively handed over power, even though from his side they're saying he's governing from abroad. But the reality is that some of the political players and the elements that I've talked about do understand that there is sort of a vacuum, and so it is encouraging them to manifest in the manner that we're seeing it manifest. And then, of course, the last one I want to talk about is the environmental factors. Climate change is playing a role, and it's triggering some of the issues that we're seeing. I haven't spoken about the weapons proliferation that is also adding to the factor, our porous borders, especially in coterminous states. So it's a mix of all of these things that has resulted in that 1,300 and 3,000 quarterly deaths that I spoke about earlier. And so, like I said, the situation is grave, and in my opinion, it had warranted for the National Security Council to have sat and to discuss this issue and, of course, chart a way out for the country.
Yeah, two things. The first one is that if you look at some of the factors they have listed, they simply align with the theories of a failed state. All the theories, sorts of territories not being in control of the state. You have so much weapons in the hands of non-state actors, and it's like we're walking towards being referred to as a failed state.
If you look at the state fragility index, I haven't checked it recently, but the last time I checked, if I'm right, we're occupying either number 15 or number 16 out of the 80 states or thereabout that are being reflected in that index. So clearly, our those elements are driving at the very foundation of our existence as a country, and that's why we're reflected in that state fragility index in a very poor manner. Of course, the lower you are, the higher your fragility, and if we're occupying 15 or 16, then it clearly shows that our fragility is low. Sadly.
Yeah, and also if you're talking about the state of governance, weak governance, security governance, what do you really mean by weak governance structure?
So starting from the federal government, as you know, security is in the exclusive list. And so the federal government actually plays a bigger role in everything security. But in practice, states have kind of come in to support the federal government. So starting from the federal government, this is well documented. The issues of coordination, collaboration, and cooperation within the security sector, it's so huge. The other one that has really become very apparent in this current administration is the lack of delineation of the strategic, tactical, and operational roles within the security sector. So you have strategic managers who are meant to be coordinators, now more interested in operational issues. Even when they are reeling out their performances, all you hear them say is, so this number of commanders have been killed. They would not refer to policy initiatives, especially since there is a renewed hope agenda that was sold to us by the administration and upon which we voted the administration. So you would have expected that when they are reeling out their scorecards, that they will make reference to some of the policy initiatives in that document to say we've been able to do X, Y, Z. And as an expert, I laud the content of that document. It is a marvelous document. And so it would have been really easy to win hearts and show progress. But sadly, all you hear from them is, oh, this number of commanders have been killed and X number of commanders have been killed, while several persons have been arrested. Those are operational issues that should be left to operational managers. So when you now have that lack of delineation, then clearly the question is who is driving the strategic direction? And that's why I think you have challenges within the security sector governance. The second point is, earlier on, I referred to the National Security Council. This administration will be almost 2 years old very soon. And I think I can count the number of times that the Security Council has met, probably once or maximum twice. There was the last time an expanded, I think it was, I'm not sure whether it was a Security Council or a State Council meeting. And so the founding fathers of our Constitution when they created this demarcation, this delineation, strategic, tactical, and operational, they had a reason. There are things that should be handled at that strategic level, then there are things that would be handled at this tactical level, and then of course at the operational level. And when you now have this current system where there is no delineation, then sadly what we have at the moment is what would be happening. So this is to an extent at the federal level. Then when you go to state level, I think only Lagos State has been able to create a security sector governance framework that is commendable. It has leadership that understands public security and that has created the platforms to allow public security to flow. So there are about 4 elements within that platform. You have the biggest one, which everybody kind of knows, is the Lagos Security Trust Fund. The Lagos State government realized that it could not shoulder the responsibility financially alone. So what it did is to create an independent, privately run, and this is, I think, the beauty of what Lagos did. That trust fund is independently run. It's not run by the government. All other states that have attempted to create the trust fund made the mistake of now allowing the government to run it. Lagos, it's privately run. And yes, there will be 1 or 2 persons appointed by the governor to participate in the board, but in terms of its day-to-day running and operations, it's privately run. So it now allowed the private sector confidence. You see banks, donating 500 million, 1 billion naira to that fund. And you see that fund kitting one police officer with 3 million naira. I don't think there's any other state that does that. And they're able to show you in a transparent manner the monies that have come in and what they've used the money for. So amazing way of ensuring private-public partnership in funding of security operations. Now, the second element, which is also critical, is the existence of a modern command and control center where security incidents are recorded, distress calls are received, they are filtered through. Once they are confirmed as genuine, they are now passed on to the relevant security department. And the third layer of that is the response stress layers. So they've created response capabilities across the local governments, and I think the LCAs, they call them, to a point where every distress call is responded to within 7 minutes, no matter the nature of the distress call. So depending on what the issue is, it's passed on to the relevant department, and then somebody kind of follows it up. All of these things I'm saying, you have seen it in practice. I'm not just saying something I read, something I've seen. And then there is a fourth, unit too within the system that supports all of that. The creation of the Lagos Neighborhood Watch, which is their own, example of like vigilante like we have in other states. Unfortunately, what you see in most other states, in the minimum, they appoint maybe a commissioner for security, and then they create maybe a neighborhood watch, and then they now buy vehicles or motorbikes for the security. But all of these structures that I've mentioned, you rarely find them in other locations. Another value in what the Lagos have been able to do is the private security sector has been brought in to support the public security sector. So you have like a semblance, like this command and control center that I told you is being managed by a private consultant. So that company that has expertise in data management was contracted. And while the Lagos state government has control of the center, the expertise, the technical expertise, is brought in by that private player. So it's an amazing hybrid system. And this is an example of a perfect or good, well, not perfect, but at least good, governance structure. So when I was talking about governance, this is kind of what I mean, the structure. Yeah.
Let me ask you. Yeah, a lot of the issues border on finance, and in the last, to be fair to the former president Muhammadu Buhari, there has been significant increase in the finances available to the security agencies in Nigeria since 2015, and there has been some level of improvement in the welfare, at least as budgeted, to the security agencies. Why have all these efforts not yielded the desired result? With increased finance, financial support for the security agencies, we are having greater security challenges.
It's because of this security sector governance that I mentioned. Security has become a cesspool for, for lack of a better word, for siphoning, government funds. In spite of these huge sums of money that you've mentioned, it is the most opaque sector. Almost all the other sectors are being audited. There is a significant M&E monitoring and evaluation structure in almost all other sectors, but not in the security sector. It's not audited. The M&E component is largely zero. The oversight function that the National Assembly is supposed to play is almost non-existent. And so that funds, and it's not just the Buhari administration, even this administration, at the moment, the 2025 budget, the sectoral allocation to security is about 3.8 or 3.9 thereabout trillion. There is no other sector that is near that. Not health, not education, not infrastructure. Then when you now add all the other components of security within the budget. So for instance, the security vote that goes to the states, the security component that goes to the MDAs. When we did all of that, the allocation to security overall came to like 6 trillion naira. So there is no other sector that is nearing that. There is no...
Doctor, also the fact of the matter too is this: if you look at the way the security structure we have in Nigeria here today, the Nigeria is, if you check the index for policing, Nigeria is one of the most under-policed countries in the world. In terms of personnel, where we don't have enough security personnel to even police. One of the factors, I'm told, one of the factors that has affected the fight against insurgency is the fact that even when the military go and they clear a camp or clear bandits or rebels from an area, there are no policemen to take over and keep the peace. So the soldiers have to withdraw and go to another place, and then the bandits or the insurgents come back to those areas.
Honorable, I interrogated the assumptions that a lot of, that you were made in your question. I've had it severally, and I took my time to interrogate the assumption. So one of the assumptions is that we're being policed inadequately. In other words, we don't have enough police personnel. But let's even start with the question: what is the definition of policing? Is the definition of policing equivalent to the Nigerian police force? And the answer is no. Policing is a system. Policing is a system that includes law enforcement. It includes, ensuring, for instance, prosecution of, offenders and things like that. So when you look at policing from that prism, you now ask yourself, how many institutions in Nigeria are actually carrying out policing functions? So I'll quickly mention some of them. The Nigerian Police Force, the Federal Road Safety Corps, most of the anti-corruption agencies, AFCC, name them. And to an extent, even the Civil Defense Corps, to an extent, some of its aspects is actually policing. Then the one that is even arguable is immigration. You are very familiar with the German system, and I'm sure you know that the German police is actually responsible for immigration functions. So there is no separation between, for instance, immigration and policing. So the point I'm trying to make is you can only argue that a country is under-policed when you put all of these elements together, all of these organizations that I've mentioned, and look at them as one. But in our own case, we've not done that. Some of the policing organizations are under Ministry of Interior, as you know, while others are under Ministry of Police Affairs. And at the moment, there is very little handshake between the Ministry of Interior and Ministry of Police Affairs. They operate almost, autonomously, separate from each other. I am not aware there is any platform for handshake between the two ministries. So it's ridiculous, and it is this dysfunctional nature, this amalgamated system of policing that has created the challenge for us. Then the second component is, are we even managing the deployment of the resources available to the Nigerian police force judiciously? No. Just go to any function in Abuja where VIPs have been invited, and I'm sure you've been to so many. By the time you come out, the swarm of police officers you will see in front of that function will shock you. Then station one individual from, let's say, 6 a.m. along the airport road in Abuja or in Lagos on a daily basis, and then just count the number of police personnel that will ply that route to either drop or pick up a VIP that is coming. It will shock you. Now, think of a situation where instead of that movement, all we do along the 40-kilometer route, we deploy, a couple of police officers. In fact, you already have police divisions here in most of the consular areas in the FCT. So what if you just instruct them to say, pay attention to that route, have rapid response capabilities? So I don't think we will need more than 10 deployment points within that route, that 40 kilometers. So point I'm trying to make, I have interrogated the premise of your, and I do not believe that we are under-policed. Rather, we are not managing efficiently and effectively what we have at our disposal. When we manage what we have effectively and efficiently, and we still don't have enough, then this argument will come up. Now, a lot of people cite a so-called ratio recommended by the United Nations. There is nothing. I've checked with the United Nations. I've checked with virtually all their agencies, and none of them would admit to that ratio of 450 citizens to one police officer. No. It's cited in several documents, but the source is not credible. Each country has its peculiarities, and depending on that peculiarity, you deploy adequate police officers. Now, the other elephant in the room that we have not even discussed is the role of technology in today's world. Technology has now come in as a force multiplier to support policing. So in certain instances, it's not even human beings that you need. You need the technology to support the work of those police officers. So again, I'm not supportive of that argument until we kind of iron out all of these layers before we even go to the point of adequate policing. I know there is a lot of conversation now around state policing, but I've always said let's define what we mean by policing before we even start talking of state police or policing, depending on what you want to use. And if we don't do that, what we're likely going to do is to recreate this very shambolic system we have at the federal level, recreate it at the state level, sadly.